Friends, fans, and fine folk, grab your drinks and snacks and come on down around the campfire for this short rest with me and my friend Vahid
Good
from
morning,
Dice
Rob.
Legends. Definitely the first take that we did that because I don't have audio problems ever.
No, technical problems never happen in these things.
Never,
Good
no.
morning, Rob, or good evening to people that are chatting wherever you are in the world. Great. Thanks so much, Rob, for reaching out and inviting me to join in. This is great. Looking forward to it.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So Vahid, we're going to be
Yes,
having a short rest today, so let's set up this short rest. What do you think? Firstly, what do you think we're doing that needs a short rest? Are we on some sort of a quest? Are we? Where are we? Are we in the desert? Are we in this? Are we in space? Are we in the ocean? Are we on a
we've
pirate
just
campaign?
no, we've just left the jungle.
Oh, a jungle.
It's
All right.
been really brutal.
It's been a pretty tough campaign in the jungle. We've achieved what we needed to achieve. We're heading back to our camp, our base, and we're having a short rest on the outskirts of a jungle.
Yeah,
So what are we eating for this short rest?
I'll get the last remains of my jerky and iron
So just
rations.
just just
Anyone that
rations.
played, yeah, rations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
rations, and I reckon we've managed to salvage some of the more preserved food from the pantries of the Yuan Ti temple that we raided in the jungle. Maybe something we've managed to get.
yeah,
We've got like some of maybe we've got some snake jerky.
yeah. But
And
everyone that knows my character knows that being a druid, I don't like eating snake. It's just one of those things. So I'll stick to my rations. You enjoy that snake.
fair enough. What are we drinking? Are we drinking just water? Have we got some sort of ale?
Water. I'm drinking water. It's the nectar of life.
I am also drinking water, and everybody at home should go and make sure that they stay hydrated. All right, so we're sitting around a campfire. Have we got a campfire going?
Yeah. The wood's a little bit wet, so it's probably not. It's probably pretty smoky, to be honest.
Yeah, and we've got making sure that we've got some of that jungle wood up against the fire to dry out for putting
Yeah,
on the next point.
yeah.
Wonderful. Well, let's crack into it. I usually start with talking about names, but Dice Legends pretty self-explanatory to me anyway. But to the people at home who may not understand, why legends and not legends or what
Okay.
have you?
Yeah. Thanks. So for anyone that lives in New Zealand, like you and I do, NZ, the end of our thing, are the abbreviation for New Zealand, and we live in New Zealand. And also, people that have really thick New Zealand accents pronounce the word legends. So it kind of
Legends.
just comes out as lodgons
Yeah.
anyway. And
Dice
so when we were
Legends.
thinking dice lodgons, so that is why it's called Dice Legends.
Yeah.
There is a dice maker in the world called Dice Legend.
Oh, really? Dice Legend.
Yeah,
Did you find that out
they
after making Dice Legends, or did you find that out first and
unfortunately,
went like,
yes.
yeah?
No, but she's been really we haven't had any problems yet.
Good.
She makes beautiful handmade dice, so please do go check her out and say that we love her.
It's one of the benefits of branding the way that I did. I was just like Robert Hartley GM. The chances of another professional dungeon master called Robert Hartley is relatively slim. I
Pretty
should be
slim.
okay, as long as people can spell my last name.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
You know,
easy enough.
actually coming up with a name for a stream for channel is not a trivial thing.
No.
You know, you have to think, okay, we want a name that people that are in the D&D circle already will see it and they'll have some kind of connotation, some
Mm-hmm.
connection with straight away. But then also, okay, what are the core values of our company? We want it to be a legendary story, an epic, So we had a massive brainstorm, and it took, months, more than a month, to try to finally come to this one name. Whether
Yeah.
it was the best name, who knows? But it's what we've got.
It seems to work well. It does the things that you mentioned. Like it immediately is recognizable that it's going to be something to do with TTRPGs because it's got dice that right there in the name.
Yeah,
It's clearly defining that it is NZ based. It's a New Zealand based show that you're doing, the story, an exciting D&D story. So it tells you the story. It's also short enough to fit into all of the different handles from social media, which is another important thing to do, to think when
for
you're trying
sure.
to name things. But at the end of the day, eventually, it doesn't matter what you're called because people just like it's just like people just associate it with you and not actually
That's right.
what it says. Or,
Exactly.
for the people in outside of the Down Under, let's say, how obvious is it when you see NZ that people are talking about New Zealand? Because I always wonder whether people in America see NZ and think it's one of the states. Like they often see all of the states abbreviated to two letters as well.
Yeah.
So it's like I always
New
wonder if
Zona
people's
or
yeah, New Arizona.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, when I describe and it is one of those things that I don't know if we were being obvious for us, but not obvious for the rest of the world. Because when I do explain to people overseas in Z as in New Zealand at the end, people go, oh, hey. So I don't think it's as obvious to anyone else,
Yeah.
which is, oh, well, that's just the way it goes. But you know what you're talking about? Names just become what they are, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Like Pepsi,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I guess it has something to do with being peppy,
Yeah.
like, wee.
Pepsi. Yeah. Maybe. Pep.
But like,
Pepsi.
or Three
Yeah.
Musketeers,
If you
a
thought
Mars
about it as
bar.
being if you thought about it as being like Pep C with the letter C, it sounds like a medicine. But if you just say
Yeah,
Pepsi, it does it doesn't really. That's a good
yeah,
point. Yeah, you don't really think about the name once it's become enough of a brand.
yeah. Mars bars. Why on Earth Mars?
Why Mars?
Why
Yeah.
not the Jupiter bar? You know?
I always thought it was funny that we had Mars bars, Milky Way, and Galaxy chocolate, just all space related confectionery. What are people
Exactly.
saying? New York GM says I thought it translates a little bit here as Gen Z. DiceLegenz.
DiceLegenz.
Gen Z is Gen Z the ones after millennials? Is that Gen Z? Because
I
there's
think
Generation
so.
X.
Who are Gen Z? That would
I've
be
never understood the whole
Gen. I
generation
think
thing.
Gen Z are they like the 20 to 23-year-olds now, right?
Right, so
That's
the
Gen
ones
Z,
that have
right?
been born since the millennium, maybe.
I think so.
New
Yeah.
Zealand.
No.
Ajo says that New Zealand is a state of Australia because she wants to start a fight, and I'm not gonna rise to your challenge.
One of the things I love about that whole Australia New Zealand thing is that New Zealanders, because we're the little brother or the little
Yeah.
sister, it's big for us, you know?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Aussies just don't care at all.
Yeah, yeah. It's like America and Canada. If you accidentally call an American a Canadian, they don't tend to mind. If you accidentally call a Canadian American, they're pissed off.
Oh yeah.
If you call an Australian a Kiwi, but if you call a Kiwi an Australian, they're pissed off because they're the ones that are always getting confused for the other one. So it's a pain in the
Yeah,
ass.
that's right.
Yeah, you're always getting lumped in one way, but not the other. Which is why
Yeah,
I always refer to
exactly.
Australia as West Island,
Fair
West
enough.
Island, New Zealand. All right.
Yeah,
So let's actually talk about D&D, shall we?
love it.
So DiceLegenz, what is it that you do to give us your pitch?
Oh, this is very kind of you to give us this stage like this. Okay, here we go. Elevator pitch. You ready for this? You ready for this, Rob?
I'm ready.
Okay, DiceLegenz is a professional Dungeons and Dragons show. We have a wonderful cast of television and stage professionals from here in New Zealand. We film in a studio here in the South Island of New Zealand. Our story is a low magic setting set in a grand walled city called Aratai, where 4 humble town guards, not glorious at all, at least to begin with, 4 humble town guards are all that stand in the way of the citizens of Aratai and this growing tide of darkness that, in truth, they are not equipped to combat.
Wonderful.
So
That was a hell of a summary. It's almost like you're a professional or something. So for what it's worth, I have been watching DiceLegenz for a little while now, and I have really enjoyed the story so far. I'm a little behind, but I'm opting to catch up. Not least because next week, a week from tomorrow, I will be a guest on DiceLegenz. What episode will that be? Episode 17, 18,
17.
Like
It'll be 17.
episode
Yeah.
17 I'll be a guest on, so I'm definitely catching up before that. I've got 5 more episodes to watch this week to catch up on. I'm on episode 11. Actually by then I'll be 6 more episodes to catch up on, but I'll do it because it's a highly enjoyable story to have on in the background while I'm washing dishes or I'm out on a run or whatever. Um, as
And
you
I'm
say,
loving seeing your comments come in. You know, you
you
send a
gotta have
comment
that.
away.
You gotta have that YouTube algorithm engagement. I know how it is as a
Yeah,
YouTube content creator myself. You gotta engage with the content you like. You gotta like and you gotta subscribe and you gotta hit the comments just so that YouTube knows. Oh, this is content people like. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm really enjoying the story. As you say, it's quite refreshing to see a low magic setting. There's not a lot of places, not a lot of stories, D&D stories and live play and actual play podcasts and things that do low magic because of the prevalence of wizards and sorcerers and warlocks. Oh my! But yours is like this wizard. All the wizards are there, but they're regulated. And if you're an unregistered wizard, that's illegal, and you get hunted down, and you either get taught and registered, or you get put somewhere where you're not going to be a
rogues.
problem. Maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
all sorts of fun stories can come out of that, and
Yeah,
have in the first
that's
few
right.
episodes without spoiling it for people who haven't watched. There are a few sort of arcs and side arcs and things about that sort of low magic things. Yeah, very enjoyable. I really like also about DiceLegenz that you are like you have a professional studio feel. It's like you. People often, I think, make the mistake when they're starting out an actual play or a podcast or something of going, oh, well, we're having fun at the table, me and my friends, so I'm sure some people would want to watch this. And then they just kind of stick a camera in, and it still feels like you're watching somebody playing the game, which
Yeah,
a lot of people
exactly.
think is like, oh, that's the charm of it. It just feels like watching somebody playing a home game. But they're
Yeah,
missing out on the point that it is a different beast. That playing in the game with your friends is a different form of entertainment than actually putting on a show for a streaming service or a TV show or whatever. Whereas you have, it seems right from the very beginning, you've gone ground up. We're gonna have production quality. We're gonna have different camera angles. We're gonna be able to switch between.
yeah,
We've got editors, all of that stuff. So tell us about how DiceLegenz sort of began. What
yeah,
was the
sure.
origins?
So it was actually about just over a year ago that I got serious about it. About a year before that, my eldest daughter, who is a Gen Z, uh, and I had raised her playing Dungeons. I've played D&D pretty much my entire life.
Mm.
I suspect that there's very few people in the chat here today that have played D&D longer than I have.
Let's see. I know
Um,
L Brown's played since second edition. I think. Anybody in the chat who, if you think you can challenge, how long have you been playing D&D? Let's get some notes in the chat of how long you've been playing.
I think I
When did you
started.
start with the very first box set? Was it?
I'll start with editions rather than years. I
Makes it
started
kinder
it.
on the age.
Yeah, I started with the first edition red box set. That's what I started with.
Wow, man!
And
And you've been
so,
playing ever since. You've played every
oh
edition
yeah,
since.
yeah, I've done every edition.
Yeah.
Fourth edition I played the least of, but there's still some really cool things I loved about fourth edition. So my daughter, having grown up playing D&D, like many people in the world, became fascinated by Critical Role and really fell in love with it
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
started showing her siblings
Right.
and
Yep.
me. And coming from a TV background, I was intrigued because I thought, like probably most people in the world, what? What on earth would any normal person give up 4 hours of their life to watch
Yeah.
someone else play Dungeons and Dragons? What a
Yeah.
crazy idea. But then I started watching it more and I thought, do you know what? The media landscape, because I work in television and have for 25 years, the
Yep.
media landscape is massively changing. And what I see is look at this chat that we've got going on here, right? And look at this incredible sense of community and interaction between content creators and audience. It's just incredible. And I was fascinated by it. So about this time last year, this elder daughter and myself decided we'd do it seriously. And we did a whole bunch of research. We did a whole bunch of looking into it from a business point of view. What would that look like to do it seriously?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yep.
we, like you were saying, a lot of people love their game and then they put a few cameras on and they share that game that they love with the world, and that's beautiful. There's no even hint of criticism about that. We wanted to come in right from the beginning at a professional level, even though we didn't feel that we would be able to have the kind of polish that many people that have been doing it for such a long time are able to do. We wanted to approach it with that professional perspective. And so based on that, we always intended on being in a studio, and we intended to have cast members who are performers. So that's why we have a cast of television and theater
Actors,
professionals from here in New
professional
Zealand.
storytellers. And how did that
That's
cast
right.
how did that cast come about? Were they friends of yours, or did you audition for it?
One of them, a guy named Ronnie, who, if you're in New Zealand, you'll know Ronnie. If you've lived in New Zealand for more than 5 years, you'll probably know Ronnie. He's one of the most successful children's television presenters the country's ever had. He's incredible. So I'd worked with him, and he wasn't doing anything in TV at the time. He is now, but at the time he wasn't, and he loved the idea, so he was the first one to come on board. But all the other cast members, Raylene was the next to come on board. I had never met her before.
Right.
Then Truby came on board. I had never met him before. And then finally Monique came on board, and I had never met her before. So we did an audition process. We did some play testing to make sure there was the right kind of chemistry.
Chemistry between them, and yeah.
Yeah, it turns out they all knew each other. It's just that I didn't know them.
It's hard.
So the chemistry was really easy.
In the acting industry, if you're all, again, they were all Christchurch based initially. They were all.
Yeah.
So I imagine, acting industry in New Zealand, very small. Acting industry in Christchurch specifically, even smaller. I'm not at all surprised that they all knew each other in some math.
Well, you're an actor, right? You know how it works.
Yep. I've done a lot of acting in New Zealand. I know exactly how this all works. Wraith in the chat is also Kiwi and says doesn't watch TV, so she's got no idea who he is. But understandably, yeah. If you're a Kiwi who watches TV and has a small kid, you'll definitely know Ronnie.
Yeah, so Wraith has said, I know Jason Gunn, anything after, and I have no idea. Lol. Well, the company that I worked for, Wraith, was the company that Jason Gunn owns.
Oh, there you go.
So, Jason Gunn is an amazing person. He is awesome. He is one of the most creative people on the planet. He's truly incredible. And it was a real joy to work with. I worked with him for 14 years.
So what were we talking about? So you knew Ronnie personally, like he was someone you'd worked with before, or you just knew him from the industry?
Yeah. No, we'd worked really closely for the 7 or 8 years that he worked on What Now. We worked with each other constantly.
Right. Yeah. Because you were working on What Now as well, or?
Yeah. So I'm a composer, and I've done a whole bunch of sound design stuff. And not only do I compose music for that company, but I've done thousands and thousands of sound mixing hours. And so I record any song, any voiceover that he recorded during those years, I recorded with him.
Wow.
And we did a lot of, and just on breaks, we'd play guitar together and that kind of stuff.
Have you done all of the composing for DiceLegenz? Because that's another thing.
All the music in DiceLegenz.
Yeah, that's another thing I really like about DiceLegenz is all of the different music, and you'll say like, let's have some ominous music, and then ominous music starts playing, and I'm like, damn, that's cool. I've never used music in my games because I don't know the first thing about it, and people on Reddit and things, I'll be like, have a playlist of like fight songs and stuff, but that's assuming that I understand what makes good fight music, and so I would have to go into Spotify and find good fight music and start adding them to a list, and I wouldn't even know that section that much of it. So I'm like, I just don't tend to use music.
And also on your streams, you're busy on your streams.
I'm very busy.
Like for you to have to think of music cues on top of all the other stuff that you do. Setting up voting and polls and choosing decisions. It would just be insane.
With Twitch Tales, if I also had to run music, I would love, I guess, if I'm sort of putting wish list, I guess, to have what you have of going like, let's have some chill music, or let's have and then somebody just goes boop, chill music, and it's like perfect music of what I wanted. Then maybe that'd be ideal, because I do like the idea of using music. It's kind of like watching a movie without a soundtrack, like you're just losing something perhaps from the story. But I just tend to I tend to just make do with no music and making all of the sound effects myself, and I don't need a soundboard
Awesome.
for the sound effects. I just blah 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 blah. Or I'll try and invoke the music through my words so that other people can hear their own music. When I'm playing a game at the table, like a home game or something, one of the things I will do is, like, if we're entering a battle, I'll just be like, hey, if you want to bring up some fight music, somebody, and then it's up to somebody at the table to go onto YouTube and find like one of the soundtrack from Lord of the Rings or something.
Yeah, but you know, for a stream, for us doing streaming, to get good quality music to begin with is not easy, and to get music that, if it is good quality, that hasn't been used by other people, is hard.
Yeah.
You know,
the number of times I hear the same music that's in Critical Role on other people's streams, like the fight music that they use and stuff. Yeah,
that's right. And then, no matter how good that music is, there is going to come a time when suddenly the mood needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like someone goes down.
Yeah.
And it suddenly becomes, you know, uh-oh. Well, it's really hard when you're a DM to suddenly turn your attention away from the drama
and the story,
characters.
Yeah, you're trying to set something up and it's building and you're focused on that, and then you have to suddenly go, oh yeah, music change.
Yeah. Excuse me, guys. We're just gonna stop this little mute. Just find it right. No, that's not quite right.
No, that's not right. Oh, my tech goblins. Oh my. Oh, damn, my laptop's turned off. Let me just give me a second, guys. All the problems that come with it. So that kind of leads on to your team. Who is running the stuff when you do call off screen for ominous music? Sure. What's going on behind the scenes there?
So behind the scenes, starting with music and then going around. So we have a small team of sound assists that we call on. The two main ones are a person named Declan and a person named Logan. Those are our main two sound assists, and they kind of take turns, and their job is they know the music library, and so they can cue the music without me having to tell them what to do.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah, important.
And there are still times that I do say things like, I think we need some caravan music. You know, and they know the tracks and they'll put it in. But also, we use a piece of radio software which is free called Jingle Palette. With that, you can have music going at the same time and cue spot effects at the same time without interrupting your music tracks. And so they will also play sound effects. Actually, Rob, if you're up to 11, you would not have heard the sound effects yet because they only come in like episode 13, I think.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, you wouldn't have heard that yet. So we got a sound assist who does our music and sound effects. And then we have our vision switcher who's on OBS and does all the angle changes between our cameras. And those are the only two technical people that we have in his name's Jason. He's always the same. He's always the same.
Yeah, I was trying to remember his name because I remember you call out to him a few times about like, are we on camera here with the maps? You're always trying to work out. Can you see the map? Should I turn it around a bit?
Yeah. Well, just this morning I was watching just a little bit of a reroll of Critical Role, and I was thinking, because whenever I do this, I do it from the TV lens of analyzing, and I was thinking, okay, they got 1, 2, 3 cameras there, and I think they've got 3 cameras on their maps. You know, so I was always thinking about. And then thinking, oh, hang on, but that means that their capture card must be an 8-input capture card, which means that, you know, so if you go down this big rabbit hole.
I had thoughts about doing that when I was first starting out streaming. I was expecting that I was going to become like an actual play streamer as well, because, you know, I guess I'll make a career doing D&D on Twitch. Your only thought is, I'll make D&D like games and things. And then because of the logistics of that being difficult, I was like, I won't do it immediately because I've got to save up enough to buy 5 cameras and the setup and all the lighting and the audio and blah blah blah, and enough to pay for like somebody to actually be running those things while we're playing. And so in the meantime, I started doing all of the things that I do now on Twitch, which is I do like a watch party of the latest episode of the Viva la Dirt League stuff. I do Robert Reads, where I read some of the D&D books. I do Twitch Tales, which is which is an actual play, but it's no players involved, so I don't need 4 cameras. I just need me and the audience, all sorts of things. And so I started doing all these things, and I've actually found that is my niche. That's like all of the other D&D channels are doing these actual play, and so people like so hard to stand out from the crowd from all of these other actual play podcasts and shows and things, and also have people tune in to like, oh, we're now in season 2, episode 7. What's happened in the story? Who are these characters? What are all these in-jokes that they've got? What are some of the ways that you have tackled people having to onboard come at DiceLegenz? There'll be a bunch of people in my chat right now who want to go and check out DiceLegenz and don't necessarily want to watch back 15 episodes. So what have you combated that in some way?
We've it's something I really kind of haven't resolved perfectly. So we do a mini recap at the beginning of each episode, which is fun in itself, but it's only of the previous episode, the previous week. After the first 4 episodes, I recorded a quick summary of me giving a recap of the first 4. Hey, you got some raiders.
Yeah, you got some
of the first 4 episodes. But it never really got any views, so I kind of got discouraged by that. We're about the stream that we're about to do tomorrow is the beginning of Act 2, so it's a big week for us.
Right.
And I actually went into the studio this week and recorded myself giving a full recap of the entire storyline, a big spoiler, basically, of the entire first act story. I just felt so dry. And I thought, gosh, to make this look interesting, it's going to take 2 days of editing. So I don't really want to do that. But I probably do need to do that. But I haven't resolved it yet.
That's the thing, because it's something I've been mucking about with Twitch Tales as well. We're up to episode 59 or something of Twitch Tales now, and each one's about 2 hours. After editing, it's about 2 hours long. So I've got a couple of different ideas of like do mini recaps of each episode, so that each like you do at the start of each of episodes. I really like that time you give your players 1 minute, and it goes around the table, and each person has 1 minute to recap what happened in the previous episode. And I really like that because it does like give some excitement to it, and it doesn't bore people with exposition if they have watched the previous episode. It's a good reminder if they have watched it and haven't watched it for a little while. So I'm thinking of doing something like that for my Twitch Tales, where it's just like a really short, 2 minutes at most, recap of everything that had happened. And then if you don't want to watch episode 56 for whatever reason, or you don't have the time, you just want to catch up quickly, you can just watch the recaps of each of the episodes.
Yeah.
I was also thinking maybe it would be worth doing like longer form recaps, but encompassing arcs of the campaign. Just be like, in this first arc of the campaign, which is from episode 1 to 16, this is what happened, blah blah blah, and then you can watch that one and then jump on to episode 17 and watch from there, something like that. But the problem I was having with it when I was trying to write those recaps was, as you say, kind of what's to stop it come across as just dry, just like listening to me talk for 5 minutes with exposition. And can you edit in snippets of when you're talking about, and then this happened, cut to a snippet of that would make it more interesting to watch, but it's so much more editing because you got to go find that exact clip that you want. And
that's right.
And
when I did the filming myself of this big recap, I just didn't know. I was really also struggling what level of depth to go into. You know, like how much. And so I ended up, my first take was 40 minutes.
That's a recap and a half, isn't it? I mean,
no one's going to watch a 40-minute recap.
Because the purpose of a recap is that you don't have time to watch, or you don't feel like you've got the time to watch. And it's fair because like each episode's half an hour long, and each episode is 3 hours long. So each 10 episodes is 30 hours of content. So if you can recap 10 episodes into 40 minutes, that's impressive. But still, like, the purpose of a recap is you want it to be like 5 minutes. But in 5 minutes, trying to recap everything that had happened, it's a very difficult position we're in. In the chat here, Valiant Roses said we could do YouTube descriptions in the YouTube video. could contain like a breakdown of everything happened in that episode, but with like a spoiler at the beginning, like this is what happens this episode. Then you can click on the video, you can look at the description and go, oh yeah, I've seen this episode, or oh, I got to this point, and then stop or something. Potentially.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. Not a bad idea of how to do it. It means I have to type more though.
Yeah, so much that you still have to do the recap. You still have to write out as if you're going to do the recap, and then just put it in the description rather than filming it. One of
the things I really love about when our cast do the recap is it has some excitement to it.
Yeah.
And because for those of you that haven't seen our show, what happens is we say, okay, it's time for recap, and our sound assist plays the recap music, dun, 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 and they always go, time to go.
it's every recap starts with a because they're waiting for the music to start. They're not allowed to start recapping until the music starts, and then they go, and then that's how it starts.
So we could just trim all of those 1 minute recaps, right?
True, you could.
And just put them back to back.
That
Maybe
would actually
I'll just do that.
Yeah, I think that genuinely could be an interesting video, because it is just 1 minute recaps of each episode, and you can put like on screen just episode 1, episode 2, just so that people don't get lost as to like where they're at. That way,
thank you so much, Robert. Thank you so much,
this is
chat.
brainstorming. There we go. Because it is a big issue when we're doing the things that we do. It is an important thing that you do need recaps, because once you get, it's not too bad with 15 episodes. You can get through them relatively quickly. You can binge them if you really find the story compelling, like I have. But if you get to like 20 episodes, 30 episodes, 40 episodes in, people aren't going to go back and watch, unless they're really committed. They're not going to go back and watch 40 3-hour episodes just to catch up to date, so that they can then jump in on the next episode. And so having those recaps where they can keep up with what's going on. And the problem that Critical Role has as well is that it's 3, 4, 5 hours per week. If you are busy one week and you miss it, you've now got 10 hours to catch up on, because it's 2 episodes. And if you miss 2 weeks in a row, 3 weeks in a row, you suddenly look at it and it's a daunting task to be like, I can't do it. Like I'm not watching Campaign 3 anymore, because not because of the style or the characters or the cast or anything. I've still enjoyed it just as much as I did with Campaign 1 and 2. But with my life being as busy as it is at the moment, I'm now like 10 episodes behind, and that's like 40 hours of content. I can't afford the time to binge watch Critical Role anymore. So I feel like Critical Role might be sort of a thing of the past for me. Like I've always enjoyed it. I consider myself a Critical Role fan. I'd love to meet them in person and things and work with them in any capacity, but I just can't. I can't keep up with the story.
Indeed. Well, I'm exactly the same, man. And it means I don't mean any even close to criticism of them. You know, the cast and the characters and the story, it's all engaging stuff. It's brilliantly produced,
Fantastic production value, yeah.
Amazing. But like you, I have a hard time committing that 3 hours is my max, which is why we do 3 hours.
3 hour contents, yeah.
But then for a lot of people, 3 hours is too much. Like your Viva La Dirt League, 30 minutes.
30 minutes,
right?
Yeah. 30 minutes, it makes it, it's one of the standout things of us is that it's like you don't have to worry about binge watching and catching up. We're still getting, we're like 100, almost 100 episodes in now. And we're still getting comments being like, I just binged this in 2 days so that I could catch up and blah, blah, blah. And you can, because they're half-hour episodes, and especially if you like watching them on YouTube double time speed or whatever, you can get through them very quick snap. But it does mean that a lot of our comments as well are like, these should be an hour long at least. Nothing happens in half an hour. So
that just shows, Robert, you can please some people sometimes, but you can't please all the people all the time.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, a Legacy Epoch says an animated summary feels like it's a good recap style, but then you have to pay for the animator. Yeah, if you can afford thousands of dollars a week on an animator for a recap, then yeah, maybe.
If anyone here is a keen animator that wants to do our recaps for us, you know what? That would be a wonderful service you could render us.
Yes, for sure. Man, if anybody here is a keen animator that wants to animate Twitch Tales recaps, why haven't you not reached out already? Yeah. A lot of my chat and community have said before that the 30-minute episodes for Viva seems like the perfect amount. It's not too much of their day. They can keep up with it because of the style of us being like predominantly comedy and like almost slapstick in a lot of the things that we do. It holds for 30 minutes and maybe would get tedious if it was longer. So it's enjoyable, and it's definitely a different form of content. But I find that one of the interesting things about the Viva is that it's the only campaign that a lot of people know me for, and they might not know me from my Twitch tales or my own home games and things like that. So people might see me as like that DM, the DM who does that style of stuff, and not like, this guy is also like that. That's not my predominant style as a DM. I'm not usually that kind of a DM. I'm usually more space for roleplay and like long form, and an entire session can go by with you just hanging around a campfire talking in character and stuff. That's usually my sort of go-to style more often than the we're making a thing that has to be a show. I have to keep that in the back of my mind at all times and try and keep things moving, try and railroad them a little bit more so that we actually get story that comes out every half hour. Because that's one of the problems with it being half-hour episodes, is that I have to keep something going on.
Yeah, you can't, if you have a half an hour, you can't really afford for 15 of those minutes to be discussing what type of oil to put in the landfill.
Exactly. Yeah. That actually reminds me, though, you do have phenomenal detail. One of the things I really like about your DMing is that the world seems so real, in that, like, without spoiling anything, one of the very first acts of the campaign is related to candle making, and the fact that you're not just like, it's a candle, but you're like, it's a beeswax candle, or it's a this type of candle. It's there's the different processes and stuff. Seems like it's a really real place, and the city that they're in as town guards, that it seems like it's all fleshed out. Have you, like, is this something that's always been your style as a DM, to put in all of the like detail and focus on the realism of it?
Sure. So I think that no is the short answer. So I do love detail, and I think that different settings require different approaches, right? Mm-hmm. Like in the TV and film world, they call it treatment. Like, what's your treatment of the subject matter?
Yeah.
And so when we first got our cast together, I didn't already have in mind what the story arc was going to be. We had a collaborative get together to discuss what kind of options in terms of campaign and things. And one of the things we discussed was a mundane setting.
Right, yeah.
And the cast loved that idea. And since it's not totally mundane, like it's actually, no, it has magic and there's monsters in it.
It's still a high fantasy. There's elves and dwarves and things, yeah.
That's right, exactly. But it's not like World of Warcraft, where people have massive emeralds embedded in their swords.
Yes,
you know?
Right, yeah.
And people are riding as griffins as they're on their way to work. It's not that kind of world. And so, but I didn't want it. So I tell people it's about a 3 out of 10 in terms of that fantasy, maybe 4 out of 10. So, but I felt that it needed to have some deep level of detail to give a feeling that it is a low magic setting. So things like candles, most people have tallow candles because they're the inexpensive ones, but this is a beeswax candle. That beeswax is actually really expensive. Yeah. So things like that, I think, help to emphasize that this is more mundane than a World of Warcraft approach.
Right. So that
I don't have the whole city mapped out, because one of the things I love about, I don't actually have a full map. I have a rough map on paper of what the city is, but I don't have all the details at all, because, as you know, one of the beautiful things about this whole thing of D&D is that the players are creating this world as we go along.
Yeah, so somebody goes, I really need to go to the tannery, and you go, okay, would there be a tannery in a city of this size, this population? Yeah, there'd probably be 1 or 2. Where would they be? Well, tannery's a smelly process, because they used to use like urine and stuff to tan them.
Yeah.
So it'd probably be on the outskirts of the city. Is there like an industrial part of the city? Oh yeah, and then you're sort of building it in your mind through the realism of it.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting skill that dungeon masters have to to work on and hone.
It's interesting that you mentioned tannery because there was a situation where one of the options for the players, which didn't actually eventuate, so I'm glad I didn't put a lot of effort into it, was to go to a tannery. So I went through exactly this thought process. Where would the tannery be? And of course it has to be on the outskirts of town because everyone knows tanneries are stinky and pollutant. They put a lot of pollutants. So where's it going to be? Oh, it's going to be emptying into the sea. Yeah. So, you do go through those thoughts.
Yeah, and I like the situation where, I know that about a tannery, but there's other specifics that I don't know about some other process, maybe like blacksmithing or something I haven't thought about. And then somebody at the table will be like, who happens to know about blacksmithing, will be like, oh, that's interesting. And they'll be talking in character, and they'll be like, I find it interesting that the blacksmith is next to the bakery because the pollutants from the blah de blah will be into the... And then you just haven't thought of that, and you'll be like,
exactly.
Yes, why is that? Isn't that interesting? Yeah. There must be a reason for it. Quickly scribble down a note, being like, well, that's there's some sort of story hook there that I inadvertently put in because I didn't realize the logistics of medieval town layout.
But I don't know if it's become fashionable other places in the world, but one time when I was up in Auckland, I discovered this bakery that had charcoal bread buns.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've heard of those. I don't think I've ever had one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So there you go. That's why, right? There was a fashion at some point, and the easiest way to get the charcoal was from the blacksmith.
Yeah, and you suddenly change that, and they go into the bakery, and they realize that all of the baked goods in there are tarnished with charcoal. And at first it started out with that it was a mistake because it was just soot in the air, but then people actually really liked the taste of it, or it added something, made them. Charcoal's it's like a filtration kind of thing, isn't it? It helps to cancel out a lot of diseases and things, so people who eat at that bakery feel better.
Colon cleanser.
Always a way to make a mistake into a what do they say in software engineer? It's not a glitch. It's a design choice or something. It's not a bug. It's not a bug. It's a design. It's a feature. That's it. It's not a bug. It's a feature. I want to pop back to the casting real quick because I don't feel like we talked fully about the the process of how they audition. So did you put out an audition notice to all of the acting agents and things, and you just put a poster up around town? How did you actually go about setting up an audition process?
Yeah. I did not contact acting agencies because even though we've set ourselves up as a company, we don't have a lot. We're not throwing millions of dollars around. This is a small thing. And to be honest, I just didn't want the acting agencies to be trying to get the people that they represent really high incomes because so I didn't do that at all, and it was purely for financial reasons that I didn't. But I happen to know a lot of contacts having worked in the TV industry, and so I just started asking around saying, hey,
would you be interested?
Who do you think might be such and such? And the first person that was recommended to us was Truby.
Right.
And Truby in our show, if you're new to our show, Truby plays a human fighter, and he loves the idea of it being a mundane setting. So 3 of the people that I put feelers out to and asked for them to give me some recommendations, 3 of them recommended Truby.
Oh, wow. So I think he's probably going to be one of the people I'll reach out to.
Yeah, and so we were really thrilled that he came on board. But the first person to come on board was after Ronnie. And Ronnie had no idea what he was agreeing to, actually, to be honest.
Let's do it.
He'd never played Dungeons & Dragons, and in fact, he thought we were doing Magic the Gathering.
Oh, right. A whole TV show about it. That'd be an interesting
But he didn't know what that was either. He was just keen to be involved,
Oh, I love those. I love those sorts of people where they're just like, I don't know what we're doing, but yeah, let's do it. Hells yeah, let's go. Let's just make something.
So, but Truby I didn't know, so we did hold quite a long phone interview thing with him. Raylene, we also contacted through. She'd never played Dungeons and Dragons either, but close friends of hers had suggested that she try it. and we interviewed her in a cafe. And anyone that has seen our show will know that Raylene is just so lovable.
She's just a very wholesome, adorable kind of vibe.
Yeah. And we thought, wow, this woman has got something going for her.
Just really, like, I think charm is probably the best word for it. She's just really charming person. It's as what it comes across as on screen anyway.
And it's artless, right?
Yeah.
There's no sense of it being contrived.
Yes, that's one of the things that actually stopped me being an actor for a while, and I don't really consider myself an actor too much these days. I get my need for acting itched by dungeon mastering, and playing TBT RPGs. But the acting industry, I just feel like I couldn't succeed in it because of that contrived networking that just feels like you need to do it. You need to be seen going to the right plays, and you need to speak to you need to schmooze with people at parties and things, and it all feels forced and contrived, and I just couldn't do it. But you don't get that sense from any of the cast, that they all seem to just be genuinely lovely people.
Yeah, they really are. It's and when putting together the team, I needed to know that they could perform, but you're sitting around a table without being able to edit anything out.
Yeah.
You really need to trust that there is genuine connection and trust between you. And when we met Raylene, my elder daughter and I, when we interviewed her, we didn't say anything until we got back in the car, and we both went, wow, yeah, she's brilliant.
Wow, that's good.
So she came on board, then Truby came on board, and we had someone else lined up for our fourth member, but unfortunately they weren't able to in the end, weren't able to commit, unfortunately, because they're brilliant. And so in November, with only a couple months to go, we thought, we better reach out to someone else. Well, Monique had already turned us down once.
But we persisted.
Again. We did.
But we found some incriminating photographs, and we blackmailed her.
And because the reason she had turned us down originally, back in August last year, is that she was well overcommitted.
Right.
And by the time November came around, her circumstances with COVID and stuff had changed, and she was open to new projects. She'd never played Dungeons and Dragons in the world, and in her life, and most of us in D&D world are geeks, right?
Yeah.
We're nerds and we love it. Well, Monique is genuinely cool.
She's a cool person.
She hangs out with rugby players. She goes, she's
sort of person you're like, you play D&D? Wow.
Exactly.
Like Travis in Critical Role is one of those where you're just straight up jock, big fella, really into sports, and you're like, oh, okay, it takes all folks, does it?
Yeah,
D&D
that's right.
Really does accommodate for everybody.
Yeah, and so I don't know why she agreed to come to an interview, but she did, and then she fell in love with it, and she is so into it, and it is such a blessing to have her on the show. Anyone that's seen our show, she just has so much. Her facial features alone.
Yes, she really gets. The thing I love about Monique is that whenever there's a moment where you pass the torch to them for a second for them to describe, in a similar way to a lot of good GMs will on a nat 20 or something, a critical, or when you get the killing blow or something, and you'll be like, what is it that you do to finish it, describe it or whatever. Monique will she's right there. One that comes to mind is she gets a nat 20 on a stealth check in the top. She's lying on a balcony of a fortress, and she's immediately she's got in mind what she's got, and it really shows you her creativity and her imagination and the fact that she is fully into the theater of the mind. She's pictured the whole thing. So she says she does a commando roll, and then commando crawls over to the balcony and the balustrade, with it being a fancy fortress. She's a tiefling and she's got horns, and she says, and I blend my horns into the balustrade of the banister around this thing, and there's purple flowers next to me that disguises my purple tiefling skin. Just such vivid descriptions and things. And then at one point she's trying to climb a wall, and she's using her horns to try and she's trying to climb up a wall with her horns, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Insane.
I love her energy. Really infectious.
Yeah, and so Truby Truby is just real. I haven't praised him or Ronnie very much, but they're also just brilliantly impressive. Truby is actually really experienced at Dungeons and Dragons, which is great because
Yeah, that comes through as well. He can really help out with the pacing. Like if something doesn't, oh, how does that spell work? Truby will generally know, or he'll have the book on hand to look it up and things.
Yeah. Because one of the things I've thought about the difference between you, Rob, and me is I think you know the rules better than I do.
I know the rules back to front. I'm the sort of obsessive person with an analytical mind that when I started getting into D&D 5 years ago, I absorbed the book. I read the PHB front and back, and I learned the rules. And because of my mind, they stuck around.
Yeah, and I was thinking this morning. I was thinking before we logged on. I was thinking, I wonder why that is, because I've been playing this game for a long time, right? And I actually wonder, maybe because I've played so many editions, maybe things are just a little bit fuzzy because, Mirror Image in 5th edition existed in all the other editions, but it was just a little bit different.
Yeah, I think that genuinely is a good portion of it, that I came into it with 5th edition, and so I know 5th edition rules, and there's no previous edition to muddy it. When I first started out, one of my very first games playing, a friend of mine was DMing, and I got knocked to 0 or something, and he tried explaining how death works, and he says, you only die if you get if you take necrotic damage and get knocked to 0, it's an instant kill, but otherwise it's not. And I was like, that's not one of the rules. And he's like, isn't it? And I looked up like death saving throws and things, and I was like, nah. And he goes, oh, that must have been an earlier edition, and he was getting confused.
Yeah, right.
It's just little things like that. Whereas because I've started out right from 5th edition, I've only got 5th edition rules in my mind.
Well, speaking of death saves, one of the comments that you left in one of the videos was basically pulling me up on getting the death save wrong.
Just friendly reminding, because as much as I do know the rules really well, sometimes in my comments on the Viva stuff, people will say something about the rules, and I'll be like, no, that's not how that works, and I'm ready to argue with them, and then I'll be like, just give me 1 second, and I'll go into D&D Beyond to just double check, and I'm like,
yeah,
holy cow, I've been doing blindness wrong this whole time. Like, you can't take an attack of opportunity on somebody unless you can see them, sort of thing. And I'll be like, oh wow, I've always. And then I'll go into the comments and be like, thank you for the information. I'll know that now.
Yeah. So I've had lots of, even though I've been playing for such a long time, I frequently get people who've been playing for like 5 months saying, I don't think you can do that.
I always preface my actuallying with unless this is a house rule, this is how it works, because I'm I don't care how you've house you could rule anything at all, as if that's how you play the game, if that's how you have chosen to do it, but I always want to make sure that the DM has made that as an informed choice and not they just don't know better. Like if you don't know the rule and you've ruled something, then there's a chance that is a problem for balance of the game, or a problem for the enjoyment, because the game has been designed and balanced around certain rules and you're not using the rules as written. But if you've made that informed choice of going, I don't like that in my games, I've chosen to do it this way. Because the thing for people who don't know is that in one of the games there was a death saving throws being made. Somebody got a 10 and you said that's a failure, and I thought, oh, that's interesting, because that's how I rule it in my games as well, because it gives it a 50-50 chance. 10 or less is a failure because it's and an 11 or higher is a success, and it's directly like a coin toss at that point. But rules as written, it's a 10 or more is a success, which gives you a 55% chance of a success. And D&D 5th edition is already so lent heavily towards like it being quite hard to die. They compared to earlier editions, it's like you get your death saves, you get any amount of healing or medicine checks or anything can stabilize you. There's a whole bunch of stuff that can bring you back from the dead. So I in my games I was like, no, I like it being 50-50. I'll just write down the middle. My comment was to kind of check in with you and be like, is that a conscious choice that you've made? 10 or less is a failure, or?
Yeah, no, to be honest, I think I've always been doing it 11, 1 to 10 and 11 to 20, but I had similar to you. I just gone under the assumption that it's like a coin toss. Yeah. But and so then when Fruby pointed out, and then you a few, You're not the only one that has pointed out that I got that wrong. So,
And the nat one not being two death saves, is that because you're like, I don't want there to be too much chance of them just straight
yeah.
up dying on the first turn?
Yeah, exactly. I don't like. I don't know. Maybe I
Do
am
you
just too
have you
soft.
set have you set with when it comes to Dice Legends like story? Have you got in mind something where this is all going with these four characters?
So this
Because
is one of the
yeah,
interesting things. You used the word railroading before.
mm.
There's another term that I've heard someone call, which they describe it as tunnel of fun,
Ah yeah,
where a dungeon
I like
master
that.
will have, you're on a roller coaster.
Uh-huh.
You get on the roller coaster, you have a lot of fun, you have ups and downs, exciting bits, and then you finish, right?
Yeah.
And it's a predetermined track. It's a
Yes.
tunnel of fun. That is not something that I'm interested in DMing.
Right.
So I started off and I have some macro story elements. I have no idea where the final scene is going to end up. Basically, my approach is to always know what the main significant NPCs are wanting to accomplish.
Yes.
That's my main thing. So I know what the main villains are wanting to do, what their motivation is, and how they're wanting to achieve that. And I know what the significant neutral and allied NPCs are wanting and what they want to do. I don't truly know exactly where it's all going to end up.
Mm-hmm.
We do know that there are some significant villains, and so there will probably be a showdown at some point,
Yeah.
and hopefully it'll be able to be in a climactic, exciting way. But how that will happen, I'm not sure. Already in the first act, which when you watch, you can see that there is a story arc, but I did not design, not divine. I definitely didn't divine it. I didn't design it specifically that in 15 episodes
Yeah.
we will
Right.
have a story arc that's going to be
Yeah.
centered around this, and this will be revealed. Not at all. In fact, the players have, on 2 occasions in this first act, done things that so unexpected. They have actually altered the course of where I thought the story was going
Right. Yeah.
completely.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think I know at least one of those moments as well. Yeah, I think we're on the same page there. I tend to start when I'm designing a story or a campaign or whatever. I tend to start with what do I want the where do I want well, who or what or where do I want the big bad evil guy showdown at the end kind of thing, and what what does that require? Who's the big bad evil guy going to be then, and where is the what is the what are the series of choices that big bad evil guy has taken or actions that they've done
That's
in
right.
order to get to that end thing, and then they're just going to do that. Like if the party don't intervene in any way, this is what's going to happen. But if they do
Yeah.
intervene, the big bad evil guy is going to come up against it and have to come around that obstacle. He's going to have to change his plans or whatever, and so it's
Yeah.
up to the players to get themselves into that into that guy's way, into that story in some method or another.
Yeah. And if you watch the first act of ours, you'll see by the end of the act, you'll see that the machinations of our villain, our main villain, um, our heroes are doing their best to disrupt them,
Mm-hmm.
but those machinations are so
Yeah.
big that even by the end of the first act, they've been able to affect some things, but not all
Yes. Yeah.
things.
Yeah, and they like come to the end of the first act and they're like, oh, that's the thing, and then the second act begins immediately, and they're like, oh, that's already happening as well, and because we were focused with this over here, this thing has happened.
Exactly right.
Yeah. The reason I
One of
asked about the sort of the end goal for the characters is just that with the reluctance of being too harsh with death saving throws and things, I tend to have a problem with like I tend to have a little bit of plot armor on my characters because I've set up the story so heavily around their backstories and things of the characters that are involved. I try to tie my players' characters into the story so to try and be like, why are these particular adventurers the ones to take down this particular bad guy and not some other ones?
uh Yeah.
And so if one of them dies, I'm like, now I need to rewrite my story somewhat to like try and work in this new character that they've just met. Oh, hey, fellow adventurer, now come and be a bosom buddy with us for the next, and take down this evil guy together.
Yeah. I think that I love the character's history and backstory to be interwoven into the core story. And often I find my experience in Dungeons and Dragons is that's not the case when I've played it.
Yeah.
And that I'm not talking about other people's streams and things like that, but often I've found that when I play Dungeons and Dragons, people can put a lot of thought into their backstory, but then that never actually sees the light of day. You know? At all. So for this,
especially for modules and things as well, right? Like published campaign modules, like there's the story is there already. It's in a book, so it doesn't matter what character you are or what your backstory is. It's not really going to get involved in the book unless your dungeon master specifically puts some effort into that.
So, so I really like stories, and I hope we're achieving that. I like stories where the characters are actually driving the plot because of their decisions.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And because of their makeup. And I think that's the core of theater, right?
Yeah.
Is that character drives story.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's it. And I think it's funny that Ronnie is like this huge children's presenter, because his character in this is not morally the sort of person you'd want teaching children things, and his decisions, as this sort of a not hugely moral character, have driven a huge amount of the arcs, and it's very clear that like had he not done certain actions in the first few episodes, an entire arc of this campaign would not have happened.
Do you know what? One of the questions that was asked just before, how much story material does not get used due to players deciding not to take specific or on. I had imagined, I'm not going to say what, I had imagined certain characters that would come into the story around, I was thinking probably around episode 8, the characters would be such a level that they'll reach this and they'll meet these cool characters and then our players do some things which just destroyed that entire, it was, but I love that. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah, it is the point, and it's not wasted. I don't think any amount of DMing prep is wasted, because either you can use it again later, or even if you never use that stuff that you've prepared, it was still practice. Like, you get better at a thing by practice, active practice, conscious practice. And by preparing, you are doing that. And so you're getting better at preparing, you're getting better at learning what to predict from your players' actions and things. They'll still be able to surprise you after 10 years playing together, I'm sure, but you're still just getting better at learning who they are and what they're likely to do.
So how do you balance between, I'd love to get your insights, the balance between preparing enough but still having openness?
The way
that allows the players to be modeled, what's your approach to that?
The way I do it, I do know what you mean exactly, and the way I do it is by all my preparation tends to be around world building more than anything else. Like, if I know the world really well, I know how magic works, I know how the gods work and how people in the world think about the gods and magic and the laws, I know the area of the world they're in, I know how close it is to the nearest forest and stuff. Those are all things that the players can't necessarily affect, because they're like the deep lore of this world and everything. Obviously they can affect it on minor levels, like setting forest fires and stuff, and suddenly there's no longer a forest there. But like, you know what I mean, like if you focus on that stuff, you know this in a really really strong way, then anything the players do, improvisation around what happens next is really easy, because I can just put myself in that position and be like, okay, what would happen in this world when that particular thing happens? If they are in a low magic setting, or where like, let's say they're in a city where arcane magic is illegal, but divine magic is okay in certain circumstances or whatever. And then one of the wizards of the party, or the sorcerer or whatever, he does a wild magic surge and an explosion happens and they do like a fireball.
Yeah,
It's chaos, and suddenly, how could you have prepared for that? It was wild magic surge. None of them even intended to do it, and suddenly they've blown
that's
up
right.
one of the bakeries and they've killed one of the
That's
NPCs
right.
and stuff. You might be like, how on earth does a DM prepare for knowing that? I don't prepare
Yeah,
for that. I just know how the world would react to it. The guards
that's
would
right.
be called in, and the anti-spellcasters would be called in. And what are the anti-spellcasters? Well, it's something that I've already prepared because it's part of the world building of this town. Like when I'm thinking about setting up the city that arcane magic in this city is illegal, how would they deal with it then? Well, they'd have guys with like kind of like they've got with stray animals with the long poles with the claw things on the
Yeah,
end,
yeah, yeah, right.
and they quickly whack that around your neck and implement something that prevents you doing vocal somatic components of your spell. Like you've got these things prepared already, and then when that chaos happens, you've already know how the world is going to react to it, and you just improvise that bit. That's kind of how I think of it. I do prepare some elements of like story. I try and think about the scenes that is going to happen. If I'm doing like a murder mystery or whatever, I know that they're going to have the scene of them meeting the body, and the scene where they get to investigate for clues, the scene when they meet their first suspect, and the scene when they realize that suspect can't possibly have been the one to do it because of an alibi or whatever. So I've got those sort of scenes prepped, but I don't necessarily think about too much of the details of those things. I just put a lot more time into fleshing out the world.
Yeah. One of the things that I kind of I'm intrigued by is how different DMs approach encounters in stream situations. Like not talking about just a normal around the table with a whole bunch of friends on a Sunday night. Because for a stream, if you are intending to do a show, like yours is a show and ours is a show, Twitch Tales, I mean, you have to know ahead of time something, right?
Yeah.
You have to prepare because you use Tailspire. Thank you.
Yeah.
You have to know at least something that I'm going to need these assets.
Yeah.
But obviously you don't want to railroad because you have the whole your chat is determining where the story's going.
Yeah.
Right? So you can't over prepare, otherwise you could be in big trouble.
And it comes back to kind of what I was talking about before, like the more you've played with a particular group of people, and while the specific people that are in the chat for any one Twitch Tales might change, the chat as a whole acts a certain way, and I can predict that. So the more you've played with somebody around your table or in chat, the more you can kind of predict what they might do, and they can still surprise you, of course, Sasquatch. But they can, they can. Generally, you can predict that they're not going to go off the cuff. Like Apis has certain things about them. The main character Apis, they have like they will always help an animal in need, and they won't kill unless it's necessary for them to do so, and that sort of thing. And so, generally speaking, I know that if I present them with an encounter that is like recently there was a dragon arc of the story, and the dragon, having captured Apis, wanted to prove their loyalty. Apis was like flattering them and trying to survive this dragon's clutches by flattering their way out of it. And the dragon was like wanting them to prove their loyalty to them. Oh, okay, if you think of me as a god and you really want to worship me and work with me, then kill this prisoner that I've got. I can kind of predict in my preparation that Apis is not going to kill that prisoner, but they are, and so I don't even need to really prepare what happens if they do. I focus my time, because time is limited. You don't have unlimited time to prepare every eventuality. You prepare the ones that you think are most likely to happen, which is what if Apis just straight up attacks the dragon at that moment, which was much more likely a possibility in my mind than Apis kills the prisoner. What if Apis does this or this or this? So I prepare my encounters with the eventualities of like the things I think are most likely to happen, and I put the most times into those ones, and then.
Yeah.
If something else happens that really surprises me, then I rely on my skills as an improviser and a storyteller to sort of get us to the next moment when I can pause.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's different between what you do and what we do is that although you might have some major plot points in mind into the future, you're willing for them to move. And that's very different from a module situation.
Yeah.
And I love modules. Like, that's how I got started. I've played so many D&D modules. I think they're brilliant. They're the best way of learning how to DM and all that kind of stuff. So not trying to criticize them at all. I think they're great. I've spent many a dollar buying modules. But, there is a path set out. Whereas in Twitch Tales, there isn't a path. Well, so this is my question for you is, like, you got these big things, but do you think multiple weeks in advance in terms of the fine detail?
I try to. Like a chess player, you got to try and stay ahead of the players, as it were. I try not to force their decisions by my preparation and detail. There are certain like, if Apis is captured by a green dragon in one episode, I know that for a few episodes they're going to be captured by that green. So I can focus on detail. I can focus on fleshing out the detail of who they're captured with, who are their fellow prisoners. Sure. I can focus on, like, what is the dragon's needs from Apis in this moment, and what are they going to do? What are the possibilities that they can do to not get eaten by this dragon? How are they going to? I'm going to give Apis a few scenes or a few opportunities to show their worth, so that the dragon keeps them alive and keeps them around. And so there are details you can flesh out for the next couple of weeks. Whereas if we get to the end of an arc, like we kind of are now, where Apis is just about to level up and whatever, it's really hard for me to think a few weeks in advance, because I don't know. Tomorrow is the next session. I don't know what we're going to be doing. Because we've just gotten to the end of that previous arc. We've gone back to town, and now what? Now this is the moment in the story that, and it's equally exciting for different reasons, but my preparation has to just be like 1 week in advance now, because I have to prepare 4 different options 1 week in advance, like the first part of several different arcs. Now Apis could choose to go to their hometown and explore something that's going on there, or they could go back into the woods and deal with that necromancer that I kind of hinted at in the previous arc and stuff. I've already started to seed and set up different stories, and I don't know which one the chat is going to vote to do. And so I have to have just like chapter 1 of the next arc for like 4 different books. Which is an interesting and unique experience. I really enjoy that sort of creativity from being a dungeon master.
One of the things I find different about doing a stream as opposed to being around just around the table is that I do have to have a certain amount of rough prep done. Because our stream is in a studio and all of our cast members are around a table and we use terrain and miniatures, those miniatures have to come from somewhere. That terrain has to come from somewhere, and our minis, the guy that makes our minis for us, brilliant, but he lives in a different city. He lives in Auckland, and we live in Christchurch. And so basically, after the stream on a Sunday, I have to quickly think, okay, what do I think we're going to need for next week?
What might they encounter next week?
That's right. And then get on the blower to Alex and say, Alex, I think we're going to need a lot more skeletons.
Please. I find one of the things that I learned really early on as a dungeon master, even in home games, is to try and get at the end of a session, try and get an idea from the players where they're going to be going next. I try not to leave them on a choice and be like, here's a fork in the road, we'll pick up next week, because then I do have to prepare both forks. I'll try and be like, here's a fork in the road, which one are you going to go? And they'll go, can we have some time to think about it? And I'll be like, sure, but before next session, I'm going to need to know. So we might end there, but then in the Discord or in wherever I'll be like, where are you going to go, guys? I need to know which decision you're going to choose so that I can prepare it.
It's the only way to do it, really. Otherwise, it's just too broad.
Yeah, too much to prepare, and this is why summoning spells tend to be the bane of a DM's existence, because you're like, I'm gonna use conjure animals and summon 7 brown bears, and you're like, okay, great. Do I have any brown bears with me? Did I bring brown bears today? Okay, this giant spider is going to be a brown bear.
Exactly.
Because I didn't expect it.
And my go-to terrain thing are if you can see it. Dice.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, you've got a table?
Use
Here's a dice to represent the table.
all the time. Dice. You know. You need an extra pillar. There's your pillar.
There's your pillar. There's a pillar in the room. Boop, dice.
So yeah, I
find dice are actually a really good useful tool. The other day I had a in a home game I was running, I had like a big hobgoblin fight. They ended up talking of people doing things that surprise you. They're like deep undercover inside hobgoblin territory, and they're specifically doing a reconnaissance mission. Their job is just to stealth, find out where all of the hobgoblin camps are, rough numbers, and then report back to the dwarves who can deal with the hobgoblins with the proper army.
Sure.
But of course, they're like, we can take this one, and so the stealth thing goes wrong. They get caught. They bam, bam, bam. Suddenly they're fighting their way out. They're fighting an entire hobgoblin army camp and blah blah blah. So I've got a lot of hobgoblins on the pitch, and I don't have hobgoblin minis for it. So I'm using just pretty much anything. I've got a bunch of dwarf minis. I'm like, these are representing hobgoblins, and of course they're doing like, I did 6 points of damage to this one and 4 points of damage to this one. I'm not keeping track of that, so the dice, really useful. I just turn it to a 4 and put it next to the guy.
That's right.
He's taken 4 points of damage. I can track the health right there on the field with the use of dice.
Yeah, awesome.
And for that reason, I gave all of the hobgoblin minions just 20 HP, so that I could track them with D20s. I'm like, all right,
beautiful. One of the things you would have missed out on about 4th edition that was great.
The minions having 1 HP?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I don't know if hobgoblins are a bit too tough for that, but
yeah,
it was an easy way of
with those guys.
With it.
Yeah, with those guys, it was for a specific reason that I needed them to not be like one-hit kills, because they're like a research camp that's working on new technology, and I wanted that to feel like, so the fighter slashes one and he stays up and he goes, oh, interesting, this guy's like harder than the last hobgoblins we fought, sort of thing. So there's like, for story reasons that I didn't use it, but I do like that. I've heard that a few times about 4th edition. The minions have 1 HP and they automatically save on dex saves or something, so that you can't just immediately take them all out with a fireball or whatever.
Yeah. So, it gets bagged a lot, 4th edition, but it still has some really cool things about it.
Yeah, I imagine so. So when you had your cast all ready to go and amped up and ready to, did you like have like a session 0 with them? Like you played with them and just to check that they can get along and yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have our studio space was being, so we had all the cast kind of confirmed by November, but our studio and our set was being built in December. So we just connected using Roll20 and did it that way, and we did a couple of playtest sessions. We actually did, I think, 3 playtest sessions in total, but Monique, because I had this other person originally lined up who wasn't able to commit, Monique only ended up doing 1 playtest session before we went live. And when you watch that first episode, you can tell, because she hadn't quite got into her head that she only controls her character, not the whole universe.
Right. Yes.
So she was like,
I have a guy on the currently. He was 2 Sable sessions ago, because we record like a huge bunch and then obviously cut them into half hours. But guy Byron joined us as a guest star at the table, and it was my fault because I kind of described to him that D&D's a collaborative role playing game, and I think he took that on to mean like he can just like say things about the world and they're true. And because to kind of move the thing along and not bog things down with like you can't do that, sorry. If the things he's saying doesn't really make a difference to the world, I'll just be like, yep, okay, that's true now. I'll just roll with it. But yeah, I wish I'd been a little bit more clear with him as like, I control the world and you control your character.
Yes. And we'd actually had that conversation with Monique to begin with, but I think if you haven't played it before, she had done 1 like 2-hour session before we streamed an episode that has now been seen thousands of times by people all over the world. It's cruel. It was cruel when you think about it now.
Yeah.
But she did incredibly well, but she still hadn't really grasped at that point that she only really controls her character. So, but now, of course, they're all brilliant. They know the rules. They know their characters. They've all made spell cards and props for themselves, and they know that, they all went out and bought their own players' handbooks and
That's
all
cool.
that kind of thing.
It's really amazing to get the players that are like, you can tell that they're really excited to do it, and they would probably be doing it even if it wasn't a show kind of thing. Like they're enjoying themselves in the game, and
that's right. Yeah,
must be nice. So Truby had played. I was mistaking him for his character name. I was like, Truby's his character. No, Sully's his character. Truby had played a lot before, but he was the only one, or had any of the others had any experience?
Only he and I. He and I were the only ones that had played.
They've picked it up. They've picked it up really well. It's you can tell that they're new, obviously, to the game, but you can you'd think that they had played a little bit before that.
Yeah, just those play tests and character creation was all we'd done.
Were they play testing in their characters that they're playing now, or were they something else?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. We did play testing, and we said, okay, let's make our characters. And we said really clearly, now, this is just for you to get your handle around the game. These aren't necessarily the characters that you're going to have, right?
Yeah.
Because we haven't finalized everything. And this is just for you to get a feel, because you might see something else you like more, blah, blah, blah. All of them stuck with their playtest characters.
They just liked them.
Fell in love with their characters in the very first session.
Did you put restrictions on them being spellcasters because of the setting being low magic, or did you tell them like you can play a spellcaster, but be aware that blah blah blah?
So we knew we'd already decided that it was going to be a low magic setting.
Yeah.
And it was going to be mundane. I did want to have one spellcaster, and Ronnie was really keen to have a wizard, so he could do that. And then originally we had Truby, who plays a deliberately vanilla fighter.
Yeah.
But he plays it so it's like luxury vanilla.
Yes. It's really good.
He plays the best straight down the line fighter.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And originally the other player that was on board was a rogue. So we had a really low magic group, and then Hacapella's a bard. Mm-hmm. And so we said, okay, that's all. But then Monique came in with a cleric. And so we've ended up in this low magic setting with actually three of the four of them that can throw spells.
Yeah. But
which wasn't how I had intended, but it's still cool.
Is it different though, because two of them are with the cleric being divine magic and the other two being sort of arcane? Is that is there a distinction in your world of the spellcasters?
So the distinction in the world is that in terms of lore, the 8 great ones, or the pantheon in this world, they bestow their powers through their priests and their clerics, who can call up, they can do prayers and benedictions, and can then channel through some of the power that has really is given from their deities, and their prayers in turn reinforce the power of those that they're praying to. Whereas arcane casters are literally breaking the fabric of reality.
Yes.
So it's a totally different mechanic.
Yeah.
They are themselves, without any intermediary, accessing and smashing reality. And so if they're not trained how to do that, they can cause huge catastrophic damage to themselves and to their loved ones and to everything around them. That's at the core the difference between arcane and divine magic in our setting.
I love it. It shows such deep lore. Is this a world that you'd kind of already been toying around with before starting DiceLegenz? You came up with everything from the origin of DiceLegenz.
Yeah, everything. Cool. I knew from the beginning that I wanted it to be based in a grand walled city. Yeah. And I knew that I wanted it to have a parallel to Constantinople. Mm-hmm. And I knew that. Right. I didn't know that I wanted them to be Humbletown guards. Right. And so really all I knew is I wanted this big city, because then I could manage the encounters. Because if everything's in a big city, then for terrain and stuff like that, I don't have to have a zillion.
Yeah. You don't have to have a whole bunch of jungle tiles and things. Yeah.
Exactly. what? Next week we're in a swamp. I need to make a whole bunch of swamp, you know? So for a purely logistical reason, I wanted to have it in this city. And then out of that, once the characters were made, it was only once the characters were made that the rest of like the deities and things started to take place. Actually, it was because it was actually Monique and her cleric. She named the god that she
Right. Okay.
that she worships.
That's cool. So did you have that conversation with your players, like to say, by the way, this is going to be city based, and for that reason, I need you to never be like, oh, what's in this next city over? We should go there. Or did you say like,
Yeah.
the one restriction I'm going to put on you is that like the video game invisible walls, as it were, is around the walls of the city. Just please,
Yeah.
please try and come up with a reason for your characters to want to stay in this city.
Yeah. I've never actually said to them, you can't leave the city.
Right.
But I've tried to make the city so interesting.
And there's enough going on that they don't want to. They don't need to.
Yeah. And they have enough links to NPCs that one of the reasons that we did those session zeros is I wanted to populate their connection with the city itself. That was actually one of the main reasons. And because then they got to co-create and learn some of the key locations in the city and co-create and meet some of the core NPCs. So they already have attachment to the city before we started to play. And they already knew, the Vixen Inn, Udo's the barkeep there, so they already had some connection to the city. So that was my approach, is to actually make them fall in love with the city rather than telling them they can't leave it.
Wonderful, yeah. Seems like catch more flies with sugar than vinegar.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, you make the city, make them want to stay in the city, and then they don't realize that they can't leave.
A gilded cage.
Yeah. I love it because it also gives them such so many more tools for role playing. As the dungeon masters, we have all of the tools. We can literally create things with our minds. We can be like, oh, if we need something, there it is. Boom, it exists in the city now. And the role players don't. The players, sorry, they don't have nearly as many tools for that as we do. And so, without giving them those extra like connections to the world, when you say. Suddenly you guys are interrupted in your morning breakfast by there's a massive explosion and it seems to be coming from the southeast of the city. That, southeast of the city, so what? But if some of them, if during a session zero you've set up that one of the characters is from the southeast of the city, that's where they grew up, that's where all of their friends and their family and their business lives, then they go, it's from the southeast. Whereabouts is it? I'm gonna go check it out immediately. I need to get there. My family might be in danger.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And the other thing I love about the other reason I wanted it to start in this grand walled city is because backstory. I really wanted the backstories of the characters to actually mean something in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've noticed in my own games as a DM, and also in other people DM games where I'm playing, is that very often players will make these backstories with NPCs. And then the moment they go on an adventure, they leave all that stuff behind.
Everything goes behind, and you're like, in your backstory, you were like, you were betrothed to marry this woman or whatever, and then you pick up the first episode of the campaign and just never think about her again.
Exactly. So the whole idea from a show concept point of view was, let's create this really rich environment that they will be attracted to stay in, and also their subplot elements can be easily accessed.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it sounds rather mechanical.
Yeah.
And, but actually it's worked because, they do know these people and they are able to interact with their parents, so anyway.
Yeah, I had a thing when I first started DMing. I think that was one of the things I naturally, luckily, had an affinity for, is like tying their backstories in and keeping them relevant and stuff. Like one of the people playing a monk in the very first session that I ran, she said, like, I'm from a monastery and I was adopted, blah blah blah. How am I going to keep like learning as a monk? How am I going to keep like progressing in training and stuff, leveling up? How am I going to learn my new things if I'm no longer at the monastery? and
Yeah, cool.
I gave her a sending scroll, where once per day or whatever she can write like an A4 page a note to her father, and whatever she writes on this note gets sent to his note and vice versa, and so she can keep in touch with her dad, and like it's not that sudden break of, well, you've spent your whole life with this adopted father that taught you to all of this monk-like ways, and then one day you leave and you never see him again. You never think about him again. He doesn't come into the story in any way. Like keeping him in the story for her. It also meant
That's a cool idea, Rob. That's brilliant.
It also meant that he could come in as a Deus Ex Machina once when she was they were attacking a were village full of like were rats and werewolves and stuff. And she ended up getting cursed by 2 different were curses, which I meant that I had to then go into like a whole bunch of world building, just being like, how does therianthropy work in my worlds? Okay, so this is the stages of the curse, and these are the checks that they have to make, and blah blah blah, and the exhaustion levels, and there's a chance of dying. And she was like on the verge of dying because I made it really difficult. I wanted it to be like something that's, because being a werewolf is super powerful, it increases your stats and it gives you immunity to all sorts of stuff and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want people to see it as like, oh, let's just here bite me, let's buff us all up and get. So I made it like a really dangerous thing. If you get cursed, there's a very good chance you don't survive before the curse takes hold, kind of thing. So she was like on the verge of death, and she'd had this scroll and she'd been writing to her dad saying, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I've just been bitten by blah 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 blah. And I quickly worked out like the distance from him on this island, this monastery island. When is the next ship off of that island, and when can he get to the capital city, and from there how long is it a trek to here, and blah blah blah. And I worked it out, and I was like, if she can survive another 3 days, then he will arrive as like Deus Ex Machina with his paladin friend and blah blah blah, and then he'll be able to cure wounds and remove curse and blah blah blah. So he ended up saving her like right on the edge. Because of this tie-in, and then of course I got the absolute joy as a dungeon master of seeing her role playing with her adopted father that we'd heard about for so long, and up to that point during the campaign.
That's beautiful. That's brilliant, because you had the cavalry come in and rescue them, but it was a way that actually worked and enhanced the story.
Yes.
It wasn't a cop-out.
It didn't just come out from nowhere. It was still, like, the Deus Ex Machina was still because they called in the cavalry. It's still because she chose to send her... If she'd, like, done the stoic thing of being like, all's well with me, Dad, as she's coughing up blood, like, then they wouldn't have come to save her. I wouldn't have had a Deus Ex Machina. She probably would have been rolling a new character by now.
Yeah. Do you kill very many characters?
I try not to, because, as I say, I've kind of got plot armor around my characters as a default, because their backstories are so heavily tied into what I want the big bad evil guy to be. But that said, I still want the element of danger, so I tend to knock them out or get them to 0 quite often, and like have death saves and stuff. But resurrection magic is available in my world. It's just harder than just like casting a spell. There's like a ritual involved and things. Yeah. So it's possible that they will die. I tend to make the fights right on the verge of killing them without actually killing them, kind of thing. Yeah.
I'm really fascinated by, I think I might have mentioned this to you or not. I can't remember. Fate's worse than death.
Yes. PC. Yeah. I will absolutely maim a character. I saw you take a finger in something recently, and I was like, ooh, that's a DM that'll do that. That is not that common a thing. Like to have a DM that's willing to go, you've gotten yourself into a position where somebody's going to take a finger. And I did the same thing with the dragon arc that I was talking about. Apis, when they were first captured, the dragon leant his head down and said, "You archer, you've been killing my half dragon offspring. So I'm going to take a hand. Like, you can't shoot in a bow and arrow if you don't have a hand. Hold out one of your hands. I'm going to bite it off," kind of thing. And I was 100% willing to do that if the chat had decided we're not in a position to argue. We hold out a hand. He would have snapped Apis' hand right off. But the chat managed to talk them way out of it with flattery and things instead, so they managed to get out of it. But I will absolutely maim a character. I had an arc of a campaign where the character this is a home game. Characters had previously been ambushed by some sorcerer. They'd chopped off his arm during the fight with like a critical hit or something, and then he managed to escape, used his sorcery points to blink out of there. and so he came back as a recurring villain. They attacked him. They attacked his crime organization, and when they were captured, they were brought to him, and he recognized them and went, "You guys? Oh my god!" And he was about to take all of their arms, and I had planned that the next arc of the campaign was he was going to take one arm from each of them. And then suddenly the great weapon master fighter can't use his two-handed weapon anymore, and the spellcaster can't use his spells as easily because he's only got one hand to cast with, and all of these things. And they would have to go on like this whole arc to find the guy that can cast regenerate to grow them new arms and stuff. And that was up in the mountains. I had this whole thing planned out, and they were just like, "Nope, we're not. Nope, it's not going to happen." And they fought back, and the fight was so stacked against them that I thought, like, they're never going to fight back against them, and even if they do, they're going to get knocked unconscious, and he's going to take their arms while they're unconscious. And it just became the tensest fight, the closest fight. All of them were going down and up and down and up, yo-yoing between like second wind and lay on hands and cure wounds and healing word, and just like they got down to the wire. And then eventually there was just basically the fighter and the halfling left, the halfling sorcerer with his arm missing, and the sorcerer knocked out the fighter and then legged it. He was like, "I'm out of here," because he was on like 2 hit points left himself. And then the fighter got back up again with a nat 20 on his death save.
Brilliant.
And so he legged it after him, but because he was prone at the start of his turn, he couldn't quite catch up. And so he's got levels in Bard as well, that fighter, because he's like a really orator kind of guy, and his whole style is that he doesn't know that he can cast magic. He just like casts it accidentally through his own bravado. And so he shouts like, "You're never going to escape us, Arnold!" They've started calling him Arnold. And he casts Vicious Mockery. And he does 2 points of damage and knocks the sorcerer out. And they ended up winning the fight. And I just described it as being like this guy who's just, he thought he had it in the bag, and then he just knocked this fighter down like 4 times during that fight before his nat 20 get him back up. And he turns around and he sees you coming, and he just breaks down. He just falls to his knees and goes, "Why won't you stay down?" And he just, with one arm, and he just breaks down. They tie him up. And then they forget that he's got sorcery points left because he was all out of spell slots, but he's got his sorcery points. He converts sorcery points to spell slots, casts Blink, and escapes again. So he is going to be a recurring villain again at some point in the future. So it was just super tight fight, and I think that is much more interesting than just your character died.
Oh, for sure. And if the audience and the player are really invested in the character's backstory, oh, there's all sorts of nasty things that a DM can do to play around with.
You may have won this fight, but I know where you live.
Far more dramatic, far worse, far more traumatic. Than just killing the character.
Yeah.
It's not that we want them to suffer. It's just that we want them to suffer.
Yeah, because without the ups and the downs, the story is not fun. Like, if it's all ups, it's boring. If it's all downs, it's what's the word? It's disheartening. There's no hope. You've got to have the ups with the downs. You've got to have the story having interesting everything about it. Like, you gotta give them a bit of everything, including suffering and having to, maybe you're missing an eye now and you've got to deal with it. In my games I've introduced lingering injuries. If you ever get knocked to 0 and you make death saving throws, if you get a 6 or less on your death saving throw, you get a lingering injury. So maybe you've got damage to your eye and it'll take a couple of days to heal, or maybe you've got a couple of broken fingers that'll take a few days to heal, or whatever. I've got a whole table for it. But it's those things that make fights more realistic and there is still danger to going to 0 even if you don't die from it. Anyway, this has been a fantastic time. The time's flown by, but we're going to come to an end soon. So I'm going to open it to questions from the chat. Sorry that I have been ignoring you. You know how it is with short rests. I tend to get really uninterested in what the guest has to say and forget everything that you guys have said. So please, if you've been asking questions and I haven't been seeing them, please do repeat them now. Mods, if you've seen any questions I've missed as well, you can repeat them here. Let's see if we've got any questions. We got any questions coming in, guys? You got any questions for Vahid or me? It could be about anything: D&D, Dice Legends, Twitch Tales, the Viva la Dirt League stuff, whatever you want. Fabled, thank you for the raid. Radical, thank you for the follow. if there's no other questions coming in, there's a question. What character class makes you smile when a player comes in playing it? Like, do you like it because you can mess with them a little bit with that class? Like bards, perhaps? Or do you like that character class because it jives with your style as a DM? I will say first, one of the things I really enjoy as a Dungeon Master is Warlocks, because it gives me an automatic NPC that has great power in their life. Whether they're an Archfey Warlock, a Fiend Warlock, a Great Old One, whatever it is, by definition, the Warlock has put their soul into something else. They've made a pact with something else that is powerful and has some semblance of control over their life. And that gives me great power as a quest giver. It automatically gives me something of like, I can force this character to take on the direction of the story that I need them to go if that ever comes up. Like if I ever need them to go a particular direction, their patron can just be like, yo, go this way. And then they're likely to do it. Yeah, that's a good one. I really enjoy monks as well, so I like playing monks, and so I like having monks in the party because I just enjoy that martial artist kind of thing. How about you? Any particular class that you enjoy when players are playing them?
Well, maybe it's because I have played for such a long time. I actually really enjoy it when people come in with low-powered or support characters.
Yes.
Like, to be a bard who sees their role as giving out bardic inspirations and maybe hitting someone with a heal every once in a while. I think that I really love that.
Yeah.
Other than that, in terms of classes, I love rangers. People think that rangers are underpowered, but I love people that play rangers.
Yeah,
I think that they're cool.
Yeah, I mean, I
just want to mention one thing about warlocks, if you don't mind, real quick. My younger daughter, when she was 10, she might have even been 9, made a warlock, and the backstory of her warlock is it's a gnome that got drunk in a tavern, which is interesting to begin with because we don't have any alcohol in this household. And so she got drunk in a tavern and woke up the next morning finding that in her drunken stupor she had agreed to a pact with an otherworldly being.
I can just imagine it like at a table. Everybody else in the bar is like filtered right back to the sides of the bar because there's this massive otherworldly tentacle monster that's just walked in and sat down at one of the tables, and everybody else is going like this, but the gnome's like, "Hey man, how's it going? Do you want to play some?
Yeah.
Do you want to play some cards? What have you got?
Yeah.
I'm out of money.
Up.
I'm out of money. What could I bargain with instead? I got a good hand." This tentacle monster's like, "Give me your soul." Like, "Oh, that's fine with me." Next morning, what did I do?
Anyway,
that's good stuff. Yeah, I really enjoy that as well. The sort of support, people who are okay with playing support. I've had in my mind since the beginning, and I've never gotten a chance to play them properly. But I've had in mind like a pacifist character. I've always thought of them as maybe like a Furbolg monk, a Furbolg cleric, maybe somebody who's just like, I abhor violence and I don't have a single offensive spell. I don't carry a weapon, but I've got a whole bunch of buffing spells, and I've got calm emotions and stuff, and I've got things that have been like, "Hey, calm down," or like, "Let's get out of here," or hold person to be like, "Nope, no fighting." Oh, it's just I've always wanted to sort of test that as an idea. How do you guys handle fights with creatures that can fly? Allow the players to fly, give them ranged weapons, all sorts of stuff. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do. Spells, magic, grounding spells. Recently they obviously had this dragon fight in this arc I keep talking about, and I gave some of the NPCs the Earthbind spell so that it can bring that dragon to the ground so that other people can wail on it a bit. How about you? Creatures that can fly? How does that affect your fights?
I don't know if I have an answer to that. I think yours is much better. I don't think I've ever specifically thought about any mechanics to combat against flying creatures.
It's not a big deal, really. It's just like anything else. How do you handle a fight with creatures that can do 4 attacks per turn? Like everybody's got something they can do really well and something that they can't do really well, and you try and include some of that in each fight, or I do anyway. I try and in my preparation go, I've got a rogue in the party who's just like his one big thing is his stealth. So I'm going to give him areas on the battlefield where he can hide. If he's had a lot of that already, I'm going to put him in a desert and be like, what do you do when you can't do the one thing you're good at? Just don't do that a
Yeah.
lot. Like, give them a lot of time to lean into the thing they can do really well. But every so often, chuck a thing at them that's like, you've just been arrested, fighter, and you've got none of your weapons. What can you do with unarmed fighting? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions? Let's have a look. Someone way earlier about how to deal with players with tons of experience that can overpower your game. I mean, if they've got tons of experience, they should know better than to overpower your game. If it's a player with a ton of experience, then that's not necessarily the same thing as a metagamer. I've only been playing 5 or 6 years, but because of the amount that I play, I'd say that I have a ton of experience, and I don't like to think that I would need to be. I would just by nature of me having experience, I don't think that's a thing that is a problem that needs to be overcome. If I was metagaming and stuff, then maybe.
Yeah. It can be a difficulty for a dungeon master if your players are consciously or unconsciously trying to, undermine what you're doing.
Yeah.
Whether because they want to get all the glory or the limelight or, yeah. I mean, thankfully, I haven't had that problem very much, but I've heard of people DMs that have put a lot of effort into something, and then the one player said, "Nah, I don't want to do that."
Yeah.
And it is difficult.
Yeah. I think
I've never had that problem.
I've never, neither. And I think that I've always said that session 0 is a little bit of a misnomer. I like to call them check-in. You have a check-in session. You have one at the beginning to check in, see what sort of story that people want to tell and what they're okay with at the table and things. But you also need to have a session 0 much later into the campaign as well. You don't by calling them session 0, it implies that it's before session 1 and then no other time. It needs to be a session 0.5. Maybe it's a session 10.5 or a session 8.5. However often you want to do it or feel the need to do it. You need to have little check-ins to be like, are we still okay with the direction the thing is going? Here's without giving anything away, here's the gist of what I intend for the next arc of the campaign. Are you okay with that? Like, are you okay with the inclusion of demons or undead or whatever, or is that triggering? And I think those are the times when the players can be like, I don't want to do a political intrigue campaign because I don't have the brain space for it when I'm playing D&D or whatever. Or like, we've been having a lot of combat lately. Can we have something that's a little bit more social subterfuge? Or
Yeah, just recently, because we have finished the first act of our story arc, and tomorrow we're launching the second act, we had a week off as a break, and we took that opportunity to do exactly this, a second session 0, where I connected with all the players just to say, hey, how are you finding your interaction? How are you finding your character? What, in terms of how your backstory has been unfolding, how are you feeling of that? Where do you see it going? So we just had basically a check-in period, and that was really great. To be able to hear where the players, how they're feeling, where they're wanting to go, and it was great.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Real Life Unicorn asks, would you allow a blind archer in your campaign without too much penalty?
Depends on how.
It depends. Like, if it was someone I have played with before and I know them to. Like, if it was like people in my community will know I'm talking about Dreaded GM or Dead Aussie Gamer, fantastic friends of mine and fantastically established dungeon masters in their own right and things. They would be people that if they came to me with that as an idea and said I want to do this, I would definitely work with them to include it. I've got friends in my own life that would do it as well, where I would do it for them as well. I've also got friends in my own life where I'd be like, no, because I know them and I know that it's not going to work out well, or they're doing it for the wrong reasons. Or with that, there's also the element of, are you using a disability as a gimmick for a character, which is not okay. There's a difference between using a disability as a gimmick and including a disability for representation. I absolutely would have blind people in my campaign as NPCs and things, and have them being able to do things as well as other people. Obviously not seeing, but they make up for it in other areas that they can do or whatever. So I want that inclusion of representation, but I wouldn't want it to be used as like, oh, because he's blind, he's this Daredevil kind of character. so it's an interesting and tricky situation. So it would be entirely case by case.
Indeed. Yeah.
New York GM says, how do you deal with a new player to an established table, especially if they're not meshing well?
If they're not meshing well, that is a problem. But I think everyone that's been DMing for a while definitely would have had a case where you'll have someone new come in the middle of an established table. That happens all the time. And preparation, I think, having conversations beforehand is really essential.
Yeah.
To make sure that people know the spirit of the game and
having a new session 0, of course, is absolutely vital. Having that session 0 take place with all of the other players that are the established ones, and having them I try to, when I had this happen recently in a home game, I had all of my players recap pretty much the entire 5-year campaign that they've been running, and I was like, let's bring the new player in on the stories that we've told so far, and they can get a feeling for who these characters are, so that when they meet them, it's not just the introductions at the table that are happening, but they already know like the style of character that they are. Another big thing is, and it's a difficult one to do, but important to remember, try and limit, at least at first, the number of in-jokes, because an established table will have a lot of in-jokes. They'll have a lot of comments and references to things that have already happened in this campaign, and the new player will feel a lot more left out for those first few sessions if it's nothing but in-jokes. Until they've played for a few sessions enough to have their own in-jokes, like try and limit them, try and just be aware of them. If they're not meshing well, obviously, like with anything, it's a matter of talk to your players. Same forward advice answer that I always give to pretty much anything: talk to your players.
Indeed.
Have conversation. It's important.
Yeah, indeed.
Question from Failing Ding Bake Up. Why don't you plug your stuff more? You're so underappreciated. I think that's probably to both of us. Why don't we plug our stuff more? I mean, I feel like I plug it all the time. plugging things left, right, and center. Shameless plugging. Follow me on Robert Hartley GM on all of the things: Instagram, Twitter, everywhere. How about you? Do you feel like you're shamelessly plugging DiceLegenz wherever you can?
I'm trying to find where is that perfect balance between telling everyone all the time and not annoying people.
Yeah.
So
spamming and annoying and getting to the point where it's like that people are tuning you out because you're white noise.
Exactly. Yeah. So
I think that line comes in. that line comes in genuine engagement. I think, like on Twitter and stuff, actually replying to things and not just spamming links, but actually answering questions and stuff, just engaging with people, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's right. And like this chat that you and I are having.
Yeah, reaching out to me when you first did, and you were like, "Hey, this is who we are, and this is what we're doing, and would you be interested in collaborating?" That's the way. Right. That's the way to do it.
The reality is that you're so much more established in this Twitch space than our channel that we have a lot more to gain. If you want to look at from those purely kind of self-centered reasons. But I think, I've really enjoyed the connections that we have, and now you're coming down to our studio next week. I'm so excited,
man. I am so excited for it. I've been thinking about it like nonstop for like a week. Especially because I've been binging the last few episodes to try and catch up again. I've been like watching the story and having it on in the background while I'm doing stuff. I've been listening to the characters and the way that they all interact at the table, and I've just been basically picturing myself being there and being like, I don't know what character I'm going to be playing, because there's a session tomorrow of DiceLegenz. That's episode 16 tomorrow.
That's right.
And so we decided, like, we're not going to do character creation for me until episode 16, because as we were talking about before, who the hell knows what's going to happen in any episode to episode, especially at the start of a new act. So, like, where are they going to leave off? Where does that leave room for me to come in as a character in the next episode and stuff? So tomorrow evening I've got scheduled to have like a character creation session. I'm not sure if I'll do that on stream or not. I'm contemplating doing it on stream with people and like coming up with something, but once we know where tomorrow's episode leaves off, we'll know where I can come in, and I'm super excited to make something. I've been trying to think about which races I want to play and what character classes and stuff. And yeah, very excited.
It's going to be. We're really looking forward. All of our cast are really looking forward to it as well.
Because it's wonderful to see a New Zealand based thing. Everything I do as a Twitch streamer, there's a level of, well, I can't do it at this time because of time zones, and I can't do it this time and because this other people will be asleep, or my guest, I have to arrange short rests at certain times of the day because, you know, it's when the other people can fit it into their time slot and they're awake. So it's so refreshing that you reached out and were like, hey, we're a New Zealand company, we're doing D&D, and we're like production studio quality stuff right from the ground up. And I was like, yeah, hell yeah, let's check it out. And I didn't say yes immediately because I wanted to actually double check that it was for me. And I went and checked out DiceLegenz. By that point, I think you'd gone episodes, like, I think you were up to episode 4 or something, I don't remember. And I watched those first few and I was like, this is amazing. These guys are really, they've got great chemistry. I love that they feel like they're new to the game, but they're not. It's not slowing things down that they're new to the game. The Dungeon Master and one of the players, obviously Truby, are like onto it enough that they can be like, yeah, that's within range of your spell, or they need to make a save or whatever, without like bogging things down. There was humor involved that was really my taste. It was really refreshing to see Kiwi accents around the table. So I was like, yeah, let's do this. Let's have some sort of collab going. It doesn't matter to me, like, the numbers and things and whether bigger or not. It's just like you gotta keep a hand out to everybody, whether you hand up the wall to get up the wall or hand down the wall to bring somebody else up.
Sure. That's right.
To use that analogy, I did a Tough Mudder a few years back, like an obstacle course half marathon race thing, and you're running and you're going up walls and stuff, and nobody can do it on their own because there are like military grade obstacles, and you gotta get up that wall. And the unwritten rule, there's like you run up the wall and you put your hands up, and somebody pulls you up the wall, and then they continue with their journey, and you turn around and lie down and put your hands down for the next person to get up. And I see it the same way. Like, it doesn't matter who I'm reaching out to. I'm like, maybe your channel can help mine, maybe I can help yours.
That's right.
No matter how big either of them are, the other person can always help, because the other person always has some amount of audience that hasn't seen your thing. So
that's right.
Happy for it. All right. We are over time, and I don't want to keep you all day. So thank you very much for joining in. If you've got, let's see, so I'm just going to jump down, find one last question just for the fun of it. This is a good one. New York GM says, if you could change one rule, block, or attribute in D&D, what would it be? What's the one thing that you're like, I really don't like that's in the game, or that's whatever?
I have never used a resurrection spell in my entire DM life.
Oh, wow. Once you're dead, you're dead.
When you're dead, you're dead. I'm gonna make it. I want the heroes to survive because I think there's more. I think there's more dramatic storytelling with them being alive than dead. But if they die, they're dead. I've never ever used a resurrection spell.
Fascinating. I do use resurrection, and I really enjoy doing so because I feel it adds a lot more otherworldly stories that can happen. Because when they die. In my world, when they die, their soul goes off, and then if they've been killed by a particular monster, like a gnoll, for instance, their soul is about to be claimed by Yinogu, and if they can resurrect them in time, then they save their soul from the Yinogu, but there's a mark next to them, essentially. Really early in my games, a druid was killed by Yinogu, and so when he was resurrected, after doing like a successful ritual, because it's never even a guarantee that they're going to resurrect them, but once they did, every time he wild chips now, he has to roll a d20, and if he gets a nat 1, instead of whatever he's trying to wild chip into, he turns into a feral hyena.
Oh, that's awesome!
Because the gnolls attacked him, and now he's got that little mark next to his name and stuff.
Yeah.
If he ever goes to the afterlife as like an adventurer, if he goes like teleportation, plane a portal or whatever, and he goes to that world, Yinogu's minions will be like, "There's something about you. There's something about you. You're one that got away." And so I think it adds like extra elements, but I definitely make it difficult to do. Every time that they're resurrecting anyone, there's a ritual that they must partake in, and if they fail that, or even if they succeed on a nat 1 on the check, even if you could have done everything right and the soul just doesn't come back for whatever reason. So I definitely don't like the idea of D&D rules as written resurrection being, you cast a spell, you cast a spell, you spend a bit of gold coin, and the person's back. Yeah.
Actually, I realize now that I lied. I have once used resurrection. the players wanted to resurrect a significant NPC. This was many years ago, and it's the only time. And when this NPC was resurrected, he was so mad. He was off in the next life, partying, having a great time, and all of a sudden he was dragged down into the mud, into a beaten up body full of injuries. He was so mad.
Yeah, the tank of my party that's been around since day one, whereas his mini here, this blue-haired human fighter bard, he has said, like, out of character, he goes like, oh man, if you ever resurrect Lagan, if he dies and gets resurrected, he will be so pissed. But he's never mentioned that in character, like specifically held off mentioning it in character because it hasn't come up. So I'm really looking forward to the day that Lagan finally dies, because he is the tank and he is the brazen one that runs in there and does all the damage and stuff. So eventually he might die, and then they'll probably resurrect him because they're pretty high level now. They'll have access to it. And then I'm looking forward to that roleplay happening at some point in the inevitable future.
Yeah.
I've been like, how dare you? I was finally in the afterlife. I was finally like, I died in battle. I had this glorious whatever, and I was happy. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. All right. Thank you very much for joining us, Vahid. If people have enjoyed our talk today, and I'm sure they have, and they haven't checked out DiceLegenz, where can they do so?
Well, thankfully, you've set up these graphics for us, which makes it so easy. Thank you, Rob. So everything for us is DiceLegenz. So here on Twitch, we're DiceLegenz. On Twitter, we're DiceLegenz. YouTube, DiceLegenz. LiceDegens, not LiceDegens. Facebook, Instagram, everywhere, it's all the same. DiceLegenz.
Somebody knows marketing.
And we would love for you to come check us out on our weekend show, which here, if you're in New Zealand, is noon. Noon on a Sunday is when we stream our show, and if you're in the U.S., that's 8 Eastern time. And if you're in Australia, if you're in Sydney, that's 10 a.m. Australian time. So that's what we're doing, and we would love to have you. We'd love to have you in the chat. We've just recently trained a couple new moderators, so they'll love to introduce themselves and welcome you into the fold. We'd love to have you with us.
Yeah, there's a link right there to twitch.tv/DiceLegenz for anyone listening and not looking at the screen. It's Legends, LEGENZ, because of NZ for New Zealand at the end there. DiceLegenz. Check it out at all of the different places. Definitely check it out tomorrow after Twitch Tales. I'll be doing Twitch Tales, and then I'll raid into DiceLegenz because they'll be on for episode 16. Definitely check out episode 16 because that will set up the episode that I'm in episode 17.
Exactly.
There will not be a Twitch Tales next week because I'll be flying down to Christchurch to participate at the table. It definitely does legitimately come with my own heartfelt recommendation. It is an enjoyable story told by very good storytellers at the table. So check it out, everybody. Give them some likes and subscribes on YouTube as well. Give them some comments for the comment gods, the algorithms. You know how it all works. It's important stuff, and it really does help us all out when we, as content creators, get engagement with our stuff. All right, thank you very much for all of your subs and bits and donations and stuff as well, guys. That is what I do to earn a living, so I really appreciate all of the support wherever you can afford to give it. But until next time, have a good day, and we'll see you tomorrow for Twitch Tales and DiceLegenz. Bye. Did you know my patrons get a lot of special perks, like access to all of my homebrewed rules and stats and spells and feats and all sorts of things? Check it out.